Hey, how's it going, YouTube? Okay, so first things first before I continue, disclaimer. I am not I'm not a certified financial advisor. This is all an act. Do not attempt to do anything you are about to watch. Consult your own financial professional. This is not meant for advice or to be taken seriously. This is going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot of inaccurate information. I'm stupid. Don't listen to me. Run away. Okay. All right. Now that's out of the way. Let's talk about credit reports because a lot of my friends have questions and like to ask about how credit reports work, how credit scores work. And what I want to do is sort of give you a conceptual overview of what credit reports are and how does it affect you and so on and so forth, just to touch like the general overarching themes without getting too specific. So, credit card reporting agencies, you have three kinds. You have Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. So people in the US, they get a social security number, and when you borrow money or you have loans or mortgages, they report that payment history historically to these three agencies. And then they produce a credit profile for you. So how risky you are as a borrower. The scoring system, there's a few kinds. There's Vantage 3.0 and the traditional FICO score, which is a Fair Isaac Corporation, something like that. And the range goes from 300 to 850. So historically, very poor is 300 to 379. This is according to Experian.com. Fair is 580 to 669. Good is 670 to 739. Very good is 740 to 799. Exceptional is 800 to 850. So these agencies will basically collect your information, and when you apply for credit cards or loans or so on and so forth, or when someone has a judgment against you, like they're like, oh, you owe me money, you go to court, and then the court lets them put a judgment on you, then it goes on your credit report, including self given information like your address. It'll have stuff like your recent your old employment if you put it, and so on and so forth. So how do I even begin with this? So that's the introduction to credit scores and the companies that handle credit reports. Now, how do people get good scores on their credit reports? Well, that's a excellent question. So there's a few factors that makes up a good credit score, and I'll go by most important. Number one is payment history. Do you always pay your bill on time? And so if you miss a month, then it hurts your score for I think they keep it on the record for 7 years, something like that, unless they take it off or you negotiate to them to take it off. So the largest factor historically they'll say is 35% comes from whether or not you pay all your bills on time. So if you miss a payment, it's the largest factor, then you'll see your score dip the most out of it. So what's the general rule of thumb? Always make at least a minimum payment or pay as agreed. Factor number two, credit usage. So credit usage is another thing that's responsible for your credit report, and that makes up 30% of your FICO score. So what does that mean? If your credit card limit is $1,000 and you have a $900 balance on it, then the credit card company, credit reporting agency, will count that as having a high balance on your card, and it'll be 90% utilization. So what you want to do is have that number as low as possible. So if the credit card company gives you $1,000 limit, don't go above $100 on that limit. So you don't want to go above 10%. And this works a few ways. You have your overall credit limit. So let's say you have 10 credit cards together, and all 10 credit cards have a $20,000 limit. If of that $20,000 limit, you don't want to use more than $2,000. So there's that factor, because like once you go like 50% and up, then it'll be like, oh, too risky. And then when you're maxed out, then they'll think that you're going to very easily default, or you always need credit. Then the other factor is individual credit card. On your individual credit cards as well, even if your cumulative limit is, let's say, $20,000, in that one credit card itself, if the limit is $1,000, you don't want to use all $1,000 of it. You still want to be under that 10% for that individual credit card. Now let's say you need to make a big purchase on a credit card. What I would recommend you do is before it shows up on your statement, before like the statement date happens, pay it off before you even get the statement. So this way you have a zero balance due on your credit card. Now, there's a lot of myths actually about this, and the myth that is very damaging for people is the myth that you need to have a balance on your credit card to have a good score. No, that's completely false. If your credit card balance is zero, that means 100% of your utilization is available. That gives you the best score. So what's the lesson? The closest to zero on your credit cards, the better. And I'm focusing on credit cards instead of other kinds of debt, because credit cards is the most common form of lending thus far, and what shows on credit reports. So that takes care of that part. Length of credit history. So this is up to 15% of your FICO score. What this length means is, have you had credit for a long period of time? Had you had loans, mortgages, credit cards, like for like 10 years, 5 years, 2 years? Someone that only has a maximum 6 months history on their credit report is not going to have as great a score profile as someone that's had 2 years on their credit report. So what does this mean? Number one, if let's say your credit cards don't have an annual fee, don't ever close them. Let them stay there, because that will keep building your credit history and give you a length of time. You rather have a credit card you never use, put it in the shredding machine, just don't ever use it, and 10 years from now it'll show up as 10 years of reported history. So don't close your credit cards unless for economic reasons, financial reasons, you don't want to pay that annual fee that your credit card has, because you don't use it anyway, you don't get any benefit out of it, right? Then I would say close it. Close it if it's like a credit card, like $200 a year to keep it open, and then sure, close it. So that's that talk. Total debt and credit. So what they're saying is mix of credit or variety of loans, right? So credit card companies, they want to see that you took like a auto loan or a mortgage or a bunch of credit cards, a bunch of loans. So I personally haven't really had an issue with this. I just had a bunch of credit cards, and it's worked out fine. I would imagine that you definitely want to show some variety overall. Like, I'd rather you get 10 different credit cards with no annual fee and have that improve your credit than forcibly take out a more like a personal loan that you don't need to mix up the limit and have them charge you fees and interest for it. That seems counterintuitive for our pockets, for our financial pocket. And then the other factor is recent applications. So recent application is how much did you apply for credit so far? That takes up one of the smallest percentages of your credit score. It says 10% on this. So Obviously, if you apply for 15 credit cards in the last 2 months, your score is going to go slightly lower than, let's say, someone that applied for only one. Now, very important. So my personal take on this is, if your credit is bad and you're in a bad financial situation because you applied for a bunch of credit cards and that's what you're concerned with, I'm going to have a hard inquiry, then I think you have other more pressing issues on your credit profile, so that would affect your negative score. Because this is, yes, it hurts you, but it's the least affecting of all the factors. Like, you could hypothetically get 15, 20 inquiries, but it's only going to affect 10% of your score. So 10% out of, all right, so credit scores go from 300 to 850. So let's say there's 550 points to work with. 10% of that is 55 points. Let's say everything else is perfect, hypothetically, and you applied for 50 credit cards, right? 10% of 550, 55. So maximum score being 850. You can still have a 795 credit score, hypothetically, which is in the very good and excellent area, if you just constantly apply for, like, hypothetically 100 credit cards, right? And then make that value hit 0. So it's also important to note that hard inquiries stay on your credit report only for 2 years, and after a year, it affects you a lot less than when you initially do it. And obviously, every bank and every issuer is going to weigh it differently when they see your report. Lastly, derogatory information. Things like, let's say you owe money to someone and then they went to court and issued a judgment on you, or you filed for bankruptcy very recently within the last 10 years, or 10 years, yeah. Or like, so things like that will have a negative effect on your credit report. All right, so that's the general overview. I want to get into a few myths about credit scores and credit reports. And I'm going to go off on a little bit and focus primarily on credit cards. The reason I'm focusing on credit cards is because when people think credit reports, there's a strong association with credit cards, right? You can go to Macy's, you can go to JCPenney and get like a store card, or you can get like a MasterCard, Discover card, Visa, so on and so forth. So there's a myth that someone can have too many credit cards. My personal experience with this is that it's okay to have even 40, 50 credit cards. Why do I say this? Because the importance, and it even benefits you. So when you have like 50 credit cards, and let's say there are no balances on it, emphasis on no balances on it, it shows that you're making payments on time consistently, and that helps give you a positive track record. What comes into trouble with too many credit cards is when people get a bunch of credit cards and use them. If they can't pay off the debt, then it occurs and keeps going up, and then they're going to hurt themselves. So I want to go on a factual way, in a factual side, and yes, there's a lot of people that get credit cards, use them, and go into a cycle of debt, and I don't advocate that at all. I'm strictly looking at it in terms of what credit report agencies look at and how they work and report scores. So anyway, that concludes my first quick topic about credit scores and credit reports. I hope you found this useful and enjoy.